Chapter 1. The Fall from Grace. The year was 1812, and the autumn winds carried with them the crisp scent of dying leaves and wood smoke. In the heart of Shropshire, nestled between mist-shrouded hills and wide stretches of farmland, stood the crumbling estate of Whitmore Hall, once proud, now reduced to silence and shadows. Inside its draughty walls lived Lady Eleanor Whitmore, the only daughter of Sir Henry Whitmore, a baronet whose charm had been as boundless as his debts. The creditors had come like wolves, stripping tapestries from the walls, horses from the stables, even the very silver Eleanor's mother had polished with her own hands. And then, when nothing remained but ruin, her father had vanished, gone, no farewell, no provision for his daughter's safety, only a hurried note left on her pillow, its ink blotched and desperate. "Forgive me, Eleanor. I cannot face the shame. I go abroad. You must fend as you can." She had read those words until her vision blurred, until the letters seemed to burn through her very soul. For a week she wept, for another she raged, and then, when the hunger gnawed deeper than grief, she learned the harsh rhythm of survival. The kitchen, once full of bustling servants, and the laughter of visiting neighbors, now offered little more than stale bread crusts and onions gone soft with rot. The hearth smoked stubbornly when she tried to light it, and her fingers ached with cold. She gathered her shawl closer around her shoulders, peering into the near-empty cupboard. "Bread again," she whispered to herself, "if it may even be called that." She tore off a piece, hard as stone, and forced it past her lips, swallowing as though each bite were gravel. Outside, the caw of crows echoed from the leafless orchard. The villagers, once deferential, bowing and greeting her as "my lady," now crossed the lane to avoid her. Some laughed openly when she passed. Others muttered curses about her father's unpaid debts. None offered help. It was as if she had become a ghost before she had even died. That morning she carried a cracked jug down the slope to fetch water from the brook. Her boots, worn thin, sank into the mud. The air was sharp with the promise of winter, and the hem of her dress was damp by the time she reached the stream. She knelt, dipping the jug, watching ripples distort her reflection. Her face was pale, hollow-cheeked, with dark circles beneath her eyes. Not so long ago, suitors had praised her beauty, her lively eyes, her smile. Now she looked like a creature from the grave. As the water filled the jug, her vision swam. A dizzy spell overtook her. Her hands trembled. She pressed her palm to her forehead, fighting the weakness. "I must not faint. I must not," she whispered, though her voice was barely a breath. The world tilted. The jug slipped from her hands and shattered on the rocks. She collapsed onto the bank, the cold seeping into her bones. For a moment, she thought this was the end, that she would die as forgotten as she had lived these last months. And then the thunder of hooves. Through half-lidded eyes she glimpsed a figure on horseback, cloaked in black, broad-shouldered, his face hidden behind a half-mask of dark leather. He dismounted swiftly, his boots crunching on the frosted grass. "God in heaven!" His voice was low, commanding, yet softened by something she could not name. He knelt beside her, lifting her as though she weighed no more than a child. Her head rested against his chest. The scent of him, leather, horse, and faintly of tobacco, was strangely comforting. "Do not sleep," he said firmly. "Do you hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. He pulled a flask from his coat, tipping it to her mouth. The taste of rich wine warmed her throat. Then, from a pouch, He drew a small loaf of bread, breaking it with long, elegant fingers. "Eat," he ordered. Her pride flared, faint though she was. I cannot. You can, or you will not see another morning." His tone left no room for refusal. He pressed a piece to her lips. The scent of fresh bread made her dizzy all over again. Her hunger was greater than her pride. She opened her mouth, letting him place it upon her tongue. The warmth of it, the softness, nearly undid her. Tears burned her eyes. He watched, his gaze unreadable behind the mask. When she had swallowed, he offered another piece and another, until the trembling in her limbs subsided. At last she whispered, Why would you help me?" For a long moment he did not answer. The wind stirred, carrying with it the whisper of the brook and the distant tolling of church bells. "Because no creature should be left to starve," he said at last, "not even one abandoned by her own blood." His words cut deep. She closed her eyes, the ache of shame and grief pressing harder than hunger. When she looked up again, he was watching her, not with pity, but with an intensity that unsettled her heart. "Who are you?" she whispered. He did not reply. Instead, he rose and lifted her into his arms, carrying her as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Rest," he said. "I will see you safely home." And though she longed to protest, longed to demand his name, his purpose, his reason for hiding his face, exhaustion silenced her. Her last memory before sleep claimed her was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek and the haunting thought that she had just stepped into the first page of a story she could not yet understand. Chapter 2. The Masked Stranger. The fire in the great hall of Whitmore Hall sputtered low, the coals giving off more smoke than heat. Eleanor sat curled in her mother's old chair, her shawl drawn tight, staring at the faint glow as if it could answer the questions that tormented her. Who was he, the man in the mask, the stranger who had carried her as though she were no heavier than a feather, who had pressed bread into her hands with the tenderness of a brother, yet with the authority of a king? When she had awoken, she found herself upon her bed, her shoes neatly placed by the hearth. Her cracked jug was gone, replaced with another whole and full of fresh water. A loaf of bread lay wrapped in cloth upon the table, with a wedge of cheese beside it. There had been no note, no sign of who had brought these things. Only the faint scent of tobacco and leather lingered in the air, as though the room itself remembered him. Eleanor pressed her palms together, whispering into the silence. Why me? Why now? For 3 days, she ate sparingly from the food he had left, rationing each bite. Her strength returned slowly, though the loneliness remained as heavy as ever, and with each day her thoughts circled back to the same question. Would he return? On the 4th evening, the wind rattled the shutters, and Eleanor ventured into the orchard to gather kindling. The trees, once heavy with apples, were now bare skeletons against a grey sky. Her basket knocked against her hip as she moved from tree to tree, her breath clouding in the chill. She heard it before she saw it, the faint crunch of hooves upon frost. Her heart leapt. Turning swiftly, she saw him. The black horse emerged from the mist, its rider tall and forbidding, cloak trailing like a shadow. The half-mask concealed his face, but the same commanding stillness clung to him. For a moment she froze. Then, gathering her courage, she stepped forward. "You," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The horse stopped, steam curling from its nostrils. miles. He dismounted, his movements measured. "I see you are stronger," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying a faint echo as though born from caverns of sorrow. "Thanks to you," she replied. He inclined his head but offered nothing more. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken things. "You left food," Eleanor said at last. "You saved me. But why?" He glanced away, as if the question troubled him. "Because hunger is a cruel master. I have known it myself." The admission startled her. She had thought him wealthy, powerful, everything she was not, yet his tone carried the weight of truth. "And the mask?" she asked softly. At once his posture stiffened. He turned his head so that the fading light caught only the edge of the mask. "Do not ask of it." His words were sharp, final. Eleanor's breath caught, but she forced herself not to shrink away. "Very well," she said, "but I would know your name." He studied her for a long moment. The silence seemed to crackle like the fire back in her hearth. At last he said, "Names are dangerous things. For now you may call me only what I am, a man who does not wish to see you perish." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. A poor title for a rescuer. Something flickered in his gaze. Amusement, perhaps? Or surprise. He reached into his cloak, drew out a bundle, and placed it in her hands. The weight of it startled her. Bread, apples, even salted meat. Her throat tightened. "You cannot keep doing this. I cannot repay you. Survival is not a debt," he said simply. "It is your right." The wind stirred the dead branches overhead, sending a scatter of leaves across the frozen ground. Eleanor hugged the bundle to her chest, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "You are kind," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, only human." For a long moment they stood in silence. The ruined lady and the masked stranger, bound by a fragile thread neither could name. Then, with a fluid motion, he mounted his horse once more. "I will come again," he said, and before she could answer, he was gone, swallowed by the mist, leaving only the echo of hooves and the warmth of food in her arms. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the rafters. She should have been afraid. Any woman alone, visited by a masked man whose name she did not know, ought to tremble, but she was not afraid. No, what she felt was far more dangerous. She felt hope. Chapter 3, Whispers of the Duke. The next morning dawned bleak and grey. Eleanor wrapped her shawl tightly and set out toward the village of Brimstead, her basket swinging at her side. She had little to trade, just a pair of her mother's candlesticks, which she prayed might fetch enough for flour and salt. As she walked down the narrow, rutted lane, the familiar weight of eyes fell upon her. Farmers paused in their work. Wives turned their backs. Children pointed and whispered. "Look there," a woman muttered as Eleanor passed. "The Whitmore girl, daughter of a cheat." "Aye," another said with a curl of her lip. "Her father left half the county ruined. She ought to be in debtor's prison with him." Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. If she had learned anything these last months, it was that pride was all she had left. She would not let them see her crumble. The shopkeeper took the candlesticks with a grimace, offering only a few coins. It was less than half their worth, but Eleanor bit her tongue and accepted. Bread and a small sack of flour were placed into her basket, and she turned to leave. It was then she heard the voices behind her, two old men speaking in hushed tones near the fire. "They say he rides again," one murmured. "Who?" asked the other. "The Duke of Blackthorn. Saw him myself 2 nights past. Tall as the devil, face half covered by a mask, sent the hounds yelping with one glance. The second man crossed himself. Why does he wear the thing? Is it true he was scarred? The first said darkly. War in Spain, cannon fire, they say, left half his face ruined. Better a mask than frighten the world with what lies beneath. Eleanor's heart skipped. A masked man, could it be? The men lowered their voices further, but Eleanor caught enough. The Duke of Blackthorn had returned from war a changed man, withdrawn, reclusive, seen only on moonless nights. His estate lay just beyond the Whitmore lands, vast and shrouded in gloom. Few servants remained. He was spoken of as cursed, touched by darkness, and yet he had fed her with his own hands. Could a monster do such a thing? That evening, Eleanor lingered by the brook where she had first collapsed, her basket empty at her side. The air was sharp, the sky heavy with clouds. She shivered, though she told herself it was only the cold. And then, hooves again, she turned, and there he was, the masked stranger, dark against the horizon, his cloak whipping in the wind. "You should not be out here," he said as he dismounted. "The air will freeze your bones." "I was waiting," she admitted, before she could stop herself. His head tilted slightly, as though the admission surprised him. "For me?" Her cheeks warmed. "For food," she lied quickly. One gloved hand rested on the hilt of his riding crop. "And if I had not come, then I would have managed, as I always have." There was pride in her voice, but he seemed to hear also the thread of truth beneath it. His gaze softened, though the mask made it difficult to read. "You are strong," he said at last, "stronger than most would be." Her breath caught. She had heard nothing but scorn for months, mockery, pity, cruelty. To hear this man call her strong was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That night, as he vanished once more into the mist, Eleanor's heart ached with a new, dangerous awareness. Not gratitude, not curiosity, something deeper. In the great halls of Blackthorn Manor, the Duke sat alone, the candles guttered in silver sconces, their light falling across stone walls, lined with portraits, ancestors gazing down in silent judgment. Adrian Blackthorn removed his mask and set it upon the table. The cold air touched the scars that marred the left side of his face, a jagged line running from temple to jaw, skin twisted by fire. His left eye, once bright, was clouded now. He poured a glass of brandy and drank deeply, yet no liquor could dull the memory of her eyes, clear, defiant, unbroken. He had fed her as one might feed a wounded bird, expecting nothing, yet the sight of her swallowing her pride along with the bread had stirred something in him he thought long buried. Desire, not merely of the flesh, though her beauty lingered in his mind, but desire for something purer, rarer, connection. She had looked at him, not as monster nor spectre, but as a man, and that terrified him more than war ever had. Chapter 4. The Bargain. The first snow of winter dusted the fields like powdered sugar, whitening the hedgerows and softening the jagged lines of ruin around Whitmore Hall. Eleanor stood by the window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the flakes drift down. The bread and salted meat he had brought were nearly gone. She knew, though she dared not admit it, that she was waiting for him again. At last, unable to bear the silence of her own heart, she wrapped herself in her cloak and ventured to the brook. The cold bit into her skin, but the air tasted of something wild, anticipation, and then, as though conjured by thought alone, he appeared. The masked man, cloaked in black, his horse's hooves muffled by snow. She stepped forward, calling out before doubt could silence her. "Why do you hide from me?" He stopped short, his gloved hands tightening on the reins. "You should not speak so carelessly." "I have the right," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You have come to me again and again, feeding me, saving me, and yet I know nothing of you, nothing but the mask you wear." He dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against the frost. The horse snorted, its breath steaming in the cold. "You know enough," he said. "It is not enough for me." She dared step closer. The falling snow caught in her hair, melting into dark curls. She tilted her chin upward, her eyes locked on his. "I am not afraid of you." His shoulders stiffened. "You should be." "Why?" He paused. For a long, aching moment, only the wind moved between them. Then he said, low and harsh, "Because what lies beneath this mask is not fit for gentle eyes." Her breath caught. "Is that all you believe yourself to be? A face?" He turned sharply, as though her words struck too deep. "Do not test me, Eleanor Whitmore." Her heart stilled at the sound of her name on his lips. "You know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said again, though softer now. They stood in silence until at last she asked, "If you will not tell me who you are, then tell me why you do this, why you care whether I live or starve." Something unreadable flickered behind the mask. Then, with slow deliberation, he reached into his cloak and drew out a wrapped parcel. Bread, dried fruit, even a small wedge of cheese. He held it out. "I will continue to bring you food," he said. "I will see that you endure the winter. But in return, you will not ask me to remove this mask. Not now, not ever." Her fingers brushed his as she took the parcel. "And if I refuse?" "Then you will not see me again." The words struck harder than she expected. To lose him now, this strange, fierce guardian who had entered her solitude like a ghost, she could not bear it. At last she nodded. "Very well, I will not ask." His chest rose and fell, as though he had been holding his breath. He stepped back, his cloak swirling with the snow. "Then we are agreed," he said. "A bargain," she murmured. "Yes." His voice was low, final, yet something softer lingered in it, a note of relief. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Every few days he came, always cloaked, always masked. He brought food, sometimes wood, once even a blanket of thick wool that smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar. At first he stayed, only long enough to see her fed, but as time passed, their silences grew into words. She told him of her childhood in Whitmore Hall, the gardens her mother had loved, the lessons in music, the evenings when laughter had filled the halls. He listened in silence, as though each word were a fragile thing he dared not disturb. And once, when she asked him of war, he spoke. "It is not the battles one remembers," he said, staring into the fire they had built in the ruined orchard. "It is the faces, the ones who did not return. They follow you in sleep, in waking, in silence, always." Eleanor's hand trembled, but she reached across the space between them, laying her fingers lightly on his gloved hand. He did not pull away. "I know something of ghosts," she whispered. "Mine do not wear uniforms, but they haunt me all the same." For a long time they sat thus, two broken souls in the hush of snow, the fire crackling softly between them. As the fire burned low, Eleanor spoke again, her voice soft. "If I may not know your face, then tell me your name." The pause stretched. She thought he might refuse again, but at last he said, "Adrian." The name hung between them, warm and real. She smiled faintly. "Adrian," she repeated, as though tasting it. For the first time, he seemed almost human, not a spectre nor a savior, but a man. And that night, as she returned to the cold halls of Whitmore, Eleanor carried more than bread and cheese in her basket. She carried hope, fragile and dangerous, yet alive. Chapter 5. A Dangerous Courtship. The snow had thickened by January, lying heavy upon the hedgerows and turning the Whitmore orchards into a forest of glass. Eleanor moved about the ruined hall with more strength now, her cheeks flushed with health, her eyes brighter. Though the house was crumbling, though whispers in the village still stung, she carried within her a secret warmth. Adrian. The name alone was enough to steady her when the nights grew long. Their meetings had grown less furtive, less bound by hunger alone. He still brought food, but more often he lingered, sharing a fire with her, walking through the frost-silvered trees, speaking in low tones of things he had never spoken aloud. One evening she confessed what she had never told another soul. "My father did not simply fall into debt," she whispered, staring at the flames. "He gambled it away. He thought himself clever, always certain the next card would bring back his fortune. When he lost, he left me no note of remorse, no promise of return, only shame." Her voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her face. "I should hate him, but instead I hate myself for still loving him despite it all." The silence stretched, but then she felt his hand, gloved and strong, resting gently upon her shoulder. "You are not to blame for his sins," Adrian said, his voice low and fierce. "A child cannot choose her father, but she can choose who she becomes in spite of him. That is your strength, Eleanor. You endure." Her throat tightened. Slowly she lowered her hands and turned. His masked face was inches from hers, his eyes, those strange, piercing eyes, burning with conviction. Her heart raced. For a moment she thought, hoped, he might lift his mask and kiss her, but he pulled back, the spell broken. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. A few days later, the illusion of safety shattered. Eleanor had walked to the village to fetch salt when a carriage drew up beside her. From within emerged Sir Edmund Ashworth, a local landowner whose estates bordered the Whitmore lands. He was younger than her father but older than Adrian, smooth, well-dressed, his smile carrying the practiced charm of a man used to being obeyed. "My dear Lady Eleanor," he greeted, sweeping his hat. "How pale you look in this bitter weather. Allow me the honor of escorting you." She stiffened. "That is unnecessary, Sir Edmund." "Nonsense," he said, offering his arm. When she did not take it, his smile hardened. "You cannot go on as you are, alone, abandoned, living on scraps in a house fit only for rats. I offer you something better." She turned, her voice icy. "And what would that be?" "Marriage," he said simply. "I will restore you to comfort, and in return you will bring me Whitmore's lands, what remains of them. Together we might rebuild what your father squandered." Eleanor's breath caught. She knew well enough the truth. He cared not for her heart, nor even her company. He wanted her name, her inheritance, the shadow of her family's prestige. "Your generosity overwhelms me," she said coldly, "but I am not for sale." His smile faltered. "Think carefully, my lady. A woman alone has little power. Refuse me, and you may find yourself cast aside, mocked, destitute. The villagers already whisper. They say you consort with shadows, that a masked devil feeds you. Eleanor's heart lurched. How did he know? Edmund's gaze sharpened at her silence. Ah, so it is true. The Duke of Blackthorn, he spat the name, scarred beast that he is. Do you think him noble? Do you think he will give you a place in society? No, Lady Eleanor, he will ruin you. Marry me instead, and all will be forgiven. Her voice trembled, but she forced strength into it. I would rather starve than bind myself to a man who values me less than land. His eyes darkened. Be careful, he said softly. Even a duke cannot shield you from the world's scorn. And with that he climbed into his carriage and drove away, leaving Eleanor shaken on the snowy road. That night, when Adrian came, she told him everything. His eyes glinted behind the mask, fury in every line of his body. If he approaches you again, you will tell me, Adrian commanded. You cannot fight him, she whispered. He is powerful. The villagers respect him. They fear him as they fear me, Adrian said sharply. But only one of us has anything worth fearing. The fire cracked between them, sparks leaping into the shadows. Eleanor reached across, touching his hand. Promise me you will not bring blood upon yourself for my sake. His hand trembled beneath hers. He turned, and for a moment she thought he would reveal his face, let her see the scars he hid so fiercely. But instead, he caught her fingers in his grip fierce, desperate. You are the only light left to me, he said hoarsely. Do not ask me to let it be stolen. Her breath hitched. In that moment, she no longer saw the mask. She saw the man, the broken, haunted, noble man, and her heart knew she was lost. Chapter 6. The Unmasking. The storm came without warning. By nightfall, the Whitmore estate was battered by howling winds and sleet, the shutters groaning against the force of it. Eleanor sat near the fire, her cloak wrapped tightly about her shoulders, her heart restless. Adrian had not yet arrived, each gust rattling the ruined hall seemed to whisper of danger. She tried to steady herself, but unease grew with every passing minute. At last, the bell of St. Aldwyn's tolled midnight, and with it came a pounding at the door. Her heart leapt. She rushed to the entry, but when she pulled it open, it was not Adrian who stood there. It was Sir Edmund Ashworth. Rain poured from his cloak, his eyes glittering with triumph. Behind him, two rough-looking men waited, their shadows flickering in the stormlight. Good evening, Lady Eleanor, he drawled, stepping inside without invitation. Did I not warn you that your refusal would be unwise? Eleanor's blood ran cold. You should leave, she said, trying to keep her voice firm. This house is not yours. Oh, but it could be, Edmund sneered. And so could you. He seized her wrist. She jerked back, but his grip tightened. Do not fight me. Marry me, and I will restore your dignity. Refuse. He cast a dark glance toward the ruined rafters, and you will be left with nothing but ashes. The door slammed open behind him, struck by the wind. Yet it was not the storm that entered. It was Adrian, the Duke of Blackthorn. He filled the doorway like a shadow torn from the tempest itself, his cloak whipping about him, his masked face gleaming pale in the lightning's flash. Unhand her! The words rolled like thunder. Edmund turned, laughter bubbling in his throat. Ah! The beast himself. Tell me, your grace, do you feed all your charity cases with such tenderness, or only this one? Adrian stepped forward, every line of his body coiled with restrained fury. I said, unhand her. For a heartbeat, the two men locked eyes, power against arrogance, storm against storm. Then Edmund released her with a shove. Eleanor stumbled, and Adrian caught her, steadying her against his chest. She felt his heart hammering through his cloak, steady and strong, and terror gave way to a strange, breathless calm. But Edmund was not finished. He drew a blade, the steel flashing in the firelight. "A duel, then," he spat. "If you win, keep your little lady. If you lose, she becomes mine." "No!" Eleanor cried, but Adrian stepped forward, unflinching. The storm screamed through the broken windows as steel clashed against steel. The fight was brutal, primal. Adrian fought with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose, every strike fueled by rage, every parry by determination. Edmund was younger, quicker, but reckless. Their swords rang through the ruined hall, sparks flying. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling, her prayers lost in the thunder. At last, Edmund lunged. Adrian twisted, disarming him in a single brutal movement. The rival's blade clattered to the floor. Adrian pressed his own sword to Edmund's throat. "One more step toward her," Adrian growled, "and I will end you." Edmund's sneer faltered. With a muttered curse, he spat on the floor and backed away. "This is not over, Blackthorn. A beast cannot keep a lady from the world forever." Then he fled, his men scrambling after him into the storm. The hall fell silent but for the pounding of rain. Eleanor's knees gave way. Adrian caught her once more, lowering her gently to the chair by the fire. "Did he harm you?" Adrian asked, his voice ragged. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "You came, you saved me." For a long moment, neither spoke. The firelight flickered across his mask, half shadowing, half revealing. He seemed torn between stepping back and drawing closer. At last he whispered, "Eleanor, I cannot hide from you any longer." Her breath caught. Slowly, with trembling hands, Adrian lifted the mask from his face. The firelight revealed the truth at last. The scars. Jagged, cruel lines marred one side of his face, a ruin of once handsome features. His jaw clenched, his eyes braced for recoil, for disgust, for fear. But Eleanor did not turn away. She leaned closer, her hand rising to touch the scars with infinite gentleness. "My God," she whispered, "what they took from you." His eyes glistened. "Do you see now why I hide? Why the world calls me monster?" She shook her head fiercely. "You are no monster. You are the only man who has ever seen me, not as an inheritance, not as a burden, but as myself. Your scars," her voice broke, "they only prove that you survived." His breath shuddered, their eyes locked, unmasked at last, and then, unable to resist, Adrian bent and kissed her. The storm raged outside, but within the ruined hall, for the first time in years, Adrian Blackthorn felt the warmth of life return. Chapter 7. Love Tested. The whispers spread faster than fire through dry thatch. By morning, Eleanor could not step into the village without hearing her name laced with venom. "Did you hear? Lady Whitmore, seen walking with the Duke of Blackthorn. Feeding at his table, they say, or is it she who feeds him, the beast? Poor girl, reduced to consorting with a monster." Some laughed, others crossed themselves. None spoke kindly. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor's courage faltered, not because of their cruelty, but because of what it meant for Adrian. The world already judged him harshly. His scars, his solitude, his shadowed reputation. Now she was fuel for their fire. When she arrived at Blackthorn Manor that evening, Adrian was waiting for her in the great hall, his mask discarded, his expression grave. "You must not come here again," he said without preamble. Her heart stilled. "What do you mean?" He paced the length of the hall, every step taut with restraint. "The scandal grows. They mock you in the village. They say things I cannot bear to repeat. And tomorrow, when the Ashworths host their winter gathering, they will not stop at whispers. They will tear you apart. I will not allow it." "You would send me away?" she asked, her voice trembling. His gaze met hers, raw with anguish. "For your sake, yes. I am a ruined man, Eleanor. Half a face, half a life. You deserve more than pity and mockery. You deserve to walk into a ballroom on a gentleman's arm, admired, envied, not shunned as the bride of a beast." Her throat tightened. "And who would you have me walk with, Adrian? Sir Edmund? He offers me comfort. Yes, at the cost of my soul. He would own me like property, not love me." Adrian's jaw clenched, his voice low. "Better property than a pariah." The words struck like a blow. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Eleanor's heart pounded with fear, but deeper than fear was determination. She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "Do you truly believe I would trade your heart for Edmund's gold? That I would abandon the man who has fed me, sheltered me, listened to me, seen me when all others turned away? If you think me so shallow, Adrian, then perhaps you do not know me at all." His breath caught. For a moment his composure crumbled, but then, with a bitter shake of his head, he turned away. "Go home, Eleanor," he whispered. "Do not come tomorrow. Spare yourself." The next evening, the Ashworths' estate glittered with light. Carriages crowded the snow-dusted drive. Laughter spilled from gilded halls, and the air was thick with perfume and malice. Eleanor stood at the threshold, her heart hammering. She had no invitation, no carriage, only her resolve. When she entered, conversation faltered. Heads turned, fans fluttered. The whispers began anew. "There she is, the ruined Whitmore girl. Brazen, shameless. Look at her gown, patched and plain. She thinks the Duke will make her a duchess." As if, at the far end of the hall, stood Sir Edmund, smugness radiating from him. At his side lingered Lady Beatrice Blackthorne, lips curved in cold satisfaction, but beside them, isolated, watchful, was Adrian, masked once more, his gaze locked on Eleanor the moment she entered. The crowd shifted like wolves scenting blood. Edmund raised his glass, his voice ringing out. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us toast our guest of honor, Lady Eleanor Whitmore, who has captured the sympathy, nay, the pity, of our very own Duke of Blackthorne." Laughter erupted, sharp as knives. Adrian's fists clenched, but he remained silent. His mask hid his torment, but Eleanor saw it, felt it, as clearly as her own heart beat. She could not let them win. Her legs trembled, but she moved forward, step by step, across the polished floor, through the storm of whispers, until she stood before Adrian, every eye upon her. Then, before society's scorn, before Edmund's glee, before Adrian's despair, she reached out and took the Duke's hand. "Your Grace," she said clearly, her voice steady as a bell, "if you will still have me, I will stand by you before these people. Before all the world, I choose you." Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian froze, his eyes burning through the mask. For a heartbeat he seemed unable to breathe. Then slowly he turned his hand in hers, clasping it tight. A murmur spread, Shock, outrage, disbelief. Sir Edmund's face twisted with fury. Lady Beatrice paled, but Eleanor did not falter. She lifted her chin and stood tall, hand entwined with Adrian's, unashamed. In that moment, her choice was made. Security, wealth, reputation, they meant nothing. Only love mattered. Chapter 8. A Feast of Redemption. The scandal of Lady Eleanor's defiance spread across the county like wildfire. Some mocked her audacity, others whispered she had bewitched the Duke. But all agreed on one thing: never had society been so brazenly challenged. And then, a week later, invitations arrived. The Duke of Blackthorn requests the honor of your presence at a grand feast held at Blackthorn Manor. Curiosity and outrage collided. The villagers gossiped, the gentry sneered, but none could resist. For years, Adrian Blackthorn had lived in shadow, his scarred face hidden, his halls silent. Now he opened his doors. What spectacle awaited? The night of the feast, Blackthorn Manor blazed with light. Torches lined the drive, chandeliers glittered in the high halls, music drifted through the corridors. The very walls seemed to hum with life long absent. Eleanor stood at Adrian's side in a gown of pale silver, her head high despite the weight of countless eyes. She felt their stares, curious, cruel, incredulous, but she also felt Adrian's arm steady beneath her hand, his presence a fortress. When the guests had gathered, Adrian rose from the head of the table. For the first time he addressed them without his mask. A hush fell, gasps rippled as the firelight revealed his scars, the cruel lines of fate that had stolen his youth. Many turned away, some covered their mouths, but Adrian did not flinch. His voice carried through the hall, deep and unshaken. You call me beast, you call her ruined, but tonight you will see the truth. This woman you mock for hunger, I fed with my own hands when the world left her to starve. And tonight, before you all, I will do so again, not as charity, not as shame, but as honor. The hall held its breath. Adrian lifted a piece of bread, the simplest of foods. His hand did not tremble as he turned to Eleanor. Gently, reverently, he offered it to her. She met his gaze, her eyes bright with tears. Slowly, deliberately, she took it from his hand, her lips brushing his fingers. The act, once whispered of as scandal, became in that moment a sacrament. Eleanor rose then, her voice clear and unwavering. You see scars and call them ruin. I see scars and call them survival. You see a woman who has fallen. I see a woman who was lifted up, not by pity, but by love. And I will never be ashamed of the man who saved me, who sees me, who loves me as I am. The room was silent. No laugh, no whisper, no sneer dared break the force of her words. Adrian's eyes burned. He took her hand in his, raising it high. Before you all, I claim Eleanor Whitmore as my Duchess. She is my honor, my light, my redemption. The hall erupted, not with mockery, but with thunderous applause from those moved against their will, from servants who had long loved their master, from even the gentry who found their hearts strangely stirred. Sir Edmund alone fumed in silence. His plans crumbled to dust. Lady Beatrice, pale with defeat, turned her face away, but Eleanor and Adrian saw none of it. For them, the world had fallen away. Weeks later, work began at the Whitmore estate. Stones were cleared, windows repaired, gardens restored, and at the center of it all walked Eleanor and Adrian, side by side, hand in hand. Where once she had starved in the shadows, she now thrived in the light. Where once he had hidden behind a mask, he now walked unashamed, his scars no longer chains but symbols of triumph. Together they rebuilt not just her home, but their lives, and when the villagers whispered now, it was with awe, not scorn, for the tale of the ruined lady and the masked duke had become something greater than scandal. It had become legend. Their love, forged in hunger and shame, had blossomed into something unbreakable. Neither scars nor gossip, betrayal nor loss could stand against it. And so, at the rebuilt Whitmore Hall, laughter and light returned, carried on the voices of two souls who had found in one another what the world had tried to deny them. Love stronger than shame, scars, or betrayal.